So you've done the country reports, and these are different websites. You know, I could just scroll through. Universities have websites that aggregate the information. You're going to have these links, so it's no sense me spending too much time on them. Wherever you can find stories, news articles from the country, if they're in the native language and you happen to speak Spanish or read Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, they need to be translated, but they can actually be good because they can be very specific to events that may have happened in the person's region or country. Now, when we get to what to do with it, it will go, the lawyer will, once you've done all this country research that's specific to the different elements of the client's claim, you have to present it. So you print out the copies. I'm being really literal. You print out the copies. You may want to highlight or use Adobe highlighter and highlight whatever particular section is. And you may want to do bullet points with references to the page number for the lawyer, so that when the lawyer gets up and he's or she's presenting to the immigration court, he says, okay, you know, on December 3rd, 1988, in Mixco, Guatemala, there was a death squad, and this is supported, there was activities by death squads. And this is found in the Department of State report from that year, from Ref World, whatever, or from news reports, so forth and so on. So now the judge is hearing the statement that was given by the client, the explanation, and he has 3 or 4 reference sites that support that in Mixco at that time, these events were actually happening. So the judge is going to, this is a very specific format, is going to ask that it be presented in a table of contents. And, you know, at this stage, you wouldn't have to worry about it. I'd just be happy personally to see all the compilation. That would be a dream. I throw it in my scanner, and then, you know, I use Adobe, and I bait stamp or number each of the pages. And so, you know, you have summary of country conditions, which we'll talk about in a minute. Department of State conditions, well, I got that one from 2014. Tab B, pages 5 through 15, and so on and so on. It's all very ordered and organized. That's less important for your purposes, but just so you see how the final printout of all these pages would be organized and presented. You can put in things like if there's an agreement, I didn't really cover that, like an anti-gang agreement was signed, maybe go get a copy of the anti-gang agreement and talk about that. Shows the gang activity in that area, and that, you know, there's real, you know, effort to try to engage. It's sort of additional proof to what the claim may be. Now, this is a highly redacted, changed country, changed everything. Actually, this is from an actual case. When I brief, particularly with things like a motion to reopen based on asylum, I have to submit an appendix, okay? So we talked about giving a stack of country reports and explanations to the client when they're in front of the immigration judge applying for asylum. This gets to, and really my last piece, what to do with this information. How is this information to be synthesized in a manner that is most effective, right? How would I use it in a brief? So I go in, every brief that I write is almost a formula. I do the background, and then in the background I break up the elements of their claim. Now, I'm not going to have the opportunity to present live testimony. It's all going to be an affidavit, and then it's going to be supported by country reports and so forth. So I go into the background, I give a little bit of the personal history. And again, this is all made up names. Don't think I'm really showing you clients. Nothing in this is accurate, different country and everything. You know, I'm going to attach in from the affidavit proof that they have 2 kids. Think about this if you're talking about a cancellation case, you definitely have to document that the kids are theirs. Believe it or not, we often get birth certificates where the father's left off, even though they were married at the time. You know, we have a lot of issues when you get into source documents from other countries. So the, you're going into the background, you're showing the immigration history, and you're supporting that with source documents. Had we had more time, I'd get a little bit into like what the notice to appear looks like and certain elements of the notice to appear. You know, one of the issues here, this is part of the reconnaissance. Back when this client was being released, he didn't have his asylum date given to him in a language he understood. They just released him, and I was able to show by looking at his old documents that it was not interpreted in a language and that he was released for a lack of space. It's getting a little off topic. I just want to throw that in there. But if you were trying to build the total story about why they were fleeing their country, why they came into the United States and didn't report at the time, you know, ask for asylum, you'd partially look at some of these source documents, okay? But then, when you get down here, I would use the citation format of an appendix. I would say appendix at X. Now, in this case, I didn't have a lot of time when I was preparing it, and I didn't have organized country reports. We grabbed what we could. I cited a few of them, you know, with footnotes, kind of like you saw in that Ref World thing, but it wasn't really that good. My work product, I'm not happy about it. I would have liked to have had something that summarized all of the different country reports, and I would have put it into that filing that I showed you up where it said country conditions summary, and it would have been paginated and it would have had footnotes. And as I'm explaining what's happening to Norman, I would be able to cite to it. Instead of having to go through 50 different source documents, I could cite the summary and say, you know, at such and such a time in Guatemala, this happened, see summary. And in the summary, all of the footnotes. Now, if I'm the immigration judge looking to reopen the case, I go, oh, wow, I've never seen one of these before, because I've never seen one of them before. You guys are kind of a dream that you're in the room, so I figured I may as well just extend the dream, and I'm going to get this thing. Let's see if it happens. I would love to be able to cite a source document that summarized all of the different country reports, and I would be able to say, you know, see country report summary at, you know, page whatever of the appendix.
So it sounds like
Oh, sorry.
our first level could be, we know Guatemala, for example, is a country. El
Yep.
Salvador. So start at gathering those more generic reports for 50, 80s, and the 90s. And then as particular cases have specific cities and whatever, go back and look for those.
Right.
Put them in the hopper. Is that a good?
That'd be great. I would love that. I mean, I would ask the room now, because I'm hitting right at the 11:30 mark. I don't think I've ever finished exactly at the appointed hour. I would ask the room, like, what can we do here? Like, how can we do that?
Before we get into that, Charlotte's got one piece
Oh,
she
sorry.
needs to add. Charlotte's a professional researcher and is bringing her scientific background to bear on how to make these reports most accessible and usable for the long term.
Okay, so the general purpose, just as a framework and a little bit of background, a lot of people we've met have $20,000 in debt from other lawyers that have been working their cases for 10, 15 years. It's on credit card, they're paying 22% interest. And then they show up at Glenn's office, and he's a SAP, so he takes them in, but he can't, he may not be able to charge them $200 an hour, or maybe he does, but what we're doing helps to support that so that these people don't have to go into another $20,000 debt or decide if it's even worth it for them, or, you know. So that's what we're doing. Now, what we'd like to do for the long term is make it so that we don't have to do this every time. So I'm just thinking of like an example, like if somebody spun you around 10 times blindfolded and dropped you in the middle of the bread aisle and said, you have to get these 5 items at the grocery store. You could probably figure out where the milk is, where the bread is. You might not figure out where the condoms are because you've never been there before. So the whole purpose of this is to create a database so that we can go back and find this stuff. Next week, if Glenn wants to look it up and says, wait, that looks weird, he can find the exact source where you found the information. And next year, because we know we have at least another 2.5 years down this road and probably longer, we want to be able to access all of that. So the way we do it I work in research and psychiatry. We cite everything. So you want to have access to the source document, and you want to have it archived. So if you're screwing around on Google, I mean, you could do 2 hours of research and come up with maybe it's only 2 lines that you're going to provide to Glenn, but if you can't back it up, then it's not going to be as helpful, certainly not for the database. So what we do is, I'm thinking that when Glenn, I don't know if he's actually going to give an example, but let's say he wanted to know, what are the medical possibilities in a specific region of Guatemala right now for children. So you break that down into different areas. So you'd want to know Guatemala, you'd want to know the regions. So that might be one title that you're looking for. And then underneath that, anything you find that's mildly relevant, I mean, what I do is I just cut and paste the website. And then underneath that cut and paste, I'll give my summary, or you could even do a word for word. But you'll have that exact reference that either Glenn can go back to, or I'll be able to go back to in 3 years when I have another case that's from that same region. So if you subset it with the area, so medical would be another thing. So you want to have that specific information. Ideally, we might be able to put together a bank at some point that's an archive, so that when we're doing the research, if we also want to have keywords, so, not everybody, medical is not going to be important for everybody. It might be irrelevant for some people. So when you're doing the research, if you could do a subset of the keywords, maybe economic, it would be the country, it would be the time frame. And I think in terms of subsetting and keywords, those are probably the only things. But the other thing that's important is your name, your contact information. The date will be very relevant, and the attorney's name and the original question that you were researching. And I think that's all. One other thing. What's that? Yes, but in order for us to be able to make stuff available to you, we have to be able to contact you. And believe it or not, we can't always understand people's handwriting. So if you don't hear from us within a week, you should contact Ginny King. And her email is GINI King, KING, Jr., JR, @gmail.com. So it's Ginny King Jr. @gmail.com. So if you don't hear from us, contact her and she'll put you on the list. Yes? That's the idea. Sure.
I think this is a good segue to next steps before we throw it open. So as Glenn said, we're going to invite folks back. And our suggestion is that people go out and explore and play. If you're in a team, it would be great if you wanted to do some research, country conditions that are relevant to your client on that team. And in the interim, until we come back, we will communicate among the 6 projects and see if we can reach an agreement on how we might divide up the territory so we don't replicate the work. And so perhaps we each take a country and we identify the issues within that country that we'll take responsibility for. And then as a project, we can work collectively. We can set up Google Docs or something where those who want to contribute can all work collectively on the product. You can come back and share it periodically as it's developing, get it vetted by the expert.
Well, I don't know, I hesitate to say expert. What I want everyone to walk out of here and know, I mean, I've showed you some of the resources that are available, and I've told you really in detail, and not a lot of detail, right, what's currently happening with these cases. There needs to be something better done. Right now, there isn't anything that I can find. And so I'm hoping that if I throw it open to a group that, that comes from a lot of different backgrounds. I mean, some of you have PhDs, other people come from different groups, different experiences. If we pull that together, let's create this document. Again, what I need when I write a brief, I would love to have something that I can just cite to. And that is summarized and intelligent and makes me look like a super literate lawyer. And the judge is impressed, and everybody's impressed, and the client gets a good result. Mike? I think that's a great suggestion. That's perfect. Oh,
Sometimes even rich people or news reporters make video, and sometimes just people on YouTube will report, like in our country, they report the police.
that's a great idea. To be honest with you, I haven't told you because I haven't thought of it. It's brilliant. The question, let me just,
In China, there were like people like filming out their apartment.
right. What's interesting about that, so the question, just to repeat back, and I'm terrible about doing this, just to repeat the question, what to do with video? You come across a great video. I swear to God, I didn't think of that. I don't know. I mean, there's two things you can do. You can segment it, and I don't even have the ability in immigration court to play a video, but you could probably screenshot the video. We could probably get it. I'm saying these things because I kind of think you guys are like Santa Claus. We could get a transcript of the video. You guys would just get a court reporter for me who would transcribe it, because you guys would do that for me.
It might be also important if you see something like that on YouTube, like with other documents, download it.
Oh, absolutely.
The things that are available. You don't know how long it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I can tell you from a practical standpoint, because I'm excited about that idea. If we had a transcript, that's paper, because they're kind of old-fashioned, horse and buggy in the immigration court. Like I couldn't bring like I do in my civil practice, plug it in. They would look at me like, huh? But a transcript and the screenshot, yep.
I have a question about time frame. If, suppose we're doing research in the next couple of months, before we can find it in 2017, the case is coming for the judge until 2020, does that mean
Well, then you do updates. Jeez, another great question. So the question is time frame. Yeah, just keep telling me to repeat because I'll forget. The time frame, if you do the report in 2018, the country condition report, and then 2020 rolls around and they're showing up, although Beauregard Sessions has said that he's going to speed up this and we're going to get new dates. But let's assume that it keeps going and it's 2020. You would do a supplemental filing closer to that time. As a lawyer, and something that Naomi's tired of hearing me say is file it as soon, because what happens is after 2 years, we never get any of the stuff, and then we're rushing a month before the hearing to file it. It would be better a month before the hearing just to do a small supplemental showing what's changed in the past year and a half, if anything. So, from a time frame standpoint, when to do it, when the client goes to that master calendar, that's the first scheduling calendar, if the team was to jump on it and really work and put the whole thing together, even if 2 months later it's done and filed, and then it's 2 years later, maybe we have immigration reform and you guys all disband and go on to something else. Hopefully not. Well, hopefully we get immigration reform, but you never disband. 2 years later, it's just a matter of updating it, if you follow what I'm saying.
What if the State Department contradicts and all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory in the country, but in that particular region, it's still a problem for people to go back?
Yeah, that's the supplemental. Sorry. The question is, what if the official State Department report contradicts a year and a half later that there's any problems in the country, like there's been new elections? That would be a time where the team would have to jump in and really go in and try to contradict that with counter research. My general experience after 20 years is that whenever there's a fix in government, it doesn't really last and it doesn't really exist. It's just papered over. The problems in Guatemala and a lot of these countries are systemic and endemic and whatever. And, even though supposedly the Civil War ended, they're still fighting in different regions, so.
You mentioned that certain judges like certain types of information. Have you put together a sort of template where there's a hierarchy of information sources? The ones you're most likely to go out at first, and then going down to the ones that judges will not put in the result?
So if you look at, I'm not going to call it back up because I'm on blue screen now. What the handout has in terms of Department of State is kind of a hierarchy. I think I put UNCOR, Department of State and UNCOR are the two places to launch research from. And then underneath that, you go in and you can aggregate. Department of State, for better or worse, needs to be there. And I think UNCOR, because it's an international, is another one. I mean, Department of State is technically the main one that they look at. After that, with the exception of Amnesty, which, as I mentioned in the beginning, is still a great organization, but their country reports, I think, are often politicized. Other credible sources, blog sites, probably not so much, but a blog site or social media from a region can show evidence of what's happening. It's not, as in the immigration judge's mind, at the same level as a country report, but Facebook showing violence in that area could, substantiate an aspect of the claim.
If I can just say, the bibliography you're going to get will include a lot of law schools and special interest groups, some of which have
Do with resources in other states, like California has a big Guatemalan support community. Steal liberally. I mean, it's not academic, plagiarism allowed. So take whatever you can take and cut and paste. I mean, I suppose if we're going to publish under the network, at some point we may want some intellectual standard to it, but for purposes of putting it into the immigration court, just whatever works.
So, just in the interest of time, I think we'll cut it off now. Glenn will stick around and talk
Yeah.
to the last person standing, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So, show of hands, how many of you think you are likely to play around and do a little country research? Wow.
Thank you.
That is fantastic.
Thank you. No applause needed, just that.